When someone has a passion for what they do, it comes through in the product they provide their customers. Just ask LaRocco's Pizza's new owner, Jason Johnson, about their crust. They make it every day and let it rise for a minimum of 24 hours before they use it for their pizza. And his staff doesn't want to do anything they won't be the best at, and you can taste it in their pizza. LaRocco's Pizza, just a half block north of the I-470 and Gage Boulevard exit. Come taste the difference.
It's the season for brand new mulch, and Brown's Tree Service has got your yard covered. Brown's Tree Service utilizes hardwood mulch that retains more moisture. Not only does mulch make your yard more appealing, it also reduces weeds, improves soil, and creates insulation for plants. Get the right mulch for your job at Brown's Tree Service. They shred it, haul it, and spread it in bulk. Or you can haul it yourself for the personal touch to your property. Call Brown's Tree Service at 785-379-9212 or visit online at brownstreeservicelc.com.
It's time for Real Estate 101 with the Carrie Brown team from Preferred Advisors.
Good Saturday morning to you. This is Carrie Brown, Associate Broker with eXp Realty and the Preferred Advisors team, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. And today is my last day to have Bill Exeter with the Exeter Group on the show. So kind of sad to see you go, Bill. He's been a great co-host.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here. Say it isn't so. It's the last show.
It is the last show. And so
it's been fun.
Got to the station today, and I said, so, Bill, we're down to the last show. We need some juicy content. 1031 and juicy content. I'm just not sure we can make that happen.
Yeah, I don't think 1031 falls in there juicy. That's for sure. It's more of a party kill than anything.
Yeah. It was funny because whenever we did our first show, I said, listen, this is the kind of content that will literally put somebody on a snooze fest. So we got to keep it upbeat. We got to give some good examples and power through.
So we've gone from snooze fest to juicy. The rest is history.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so obviously, well, just in case you missed one of the earlier shows, Bill, go into territories you cover and why you would need a 1031 exchange and keep us awake.
Okay, sounds good. Well, fortunately, we cover everywhere, so all 50 states. We also one of the few exchange companies that can handle foreign property, so no matter where the property is located, as long as it's some type of rental, investment, or business use, we can administer the 1031 exchange for the client. And, probably the best way to demonstrate why is an example. So probably a basic example is someone who owns a single-family house, and it's been a rental property for maybe 5 years or so, and they decide they really like being a landlord, and they want to trade up. They're ready for a duplex or fourplex or what have you, and they visit with their accountant to find out what would happen if they sold the house, and they find out they're going to get killed on taxes. And then the accountants would say, well, if you could sell the house, you could do a 1031 exchange of the duplex or the fourplex or what have you. So that's what it's really all about, is allowing or enabling the client to sell whatever they have today, whatever your investment or rental property is, and then defer the payment of all the taxes by reinvesting in replacement property. So as long as you can reinvest at the same level, if you sell for, say, $100,000, you have to reinvest at $100,000 or greater, then the government allows you to defer the taxes. So your federal taxes and your state taxes are deferred. And the big beauty with that is that it keeps all of the money, including what you would have paid in taxes, in your pocket. And that makes it a lot easier to buy more property, more doors, more single families, whatever your goal is, and really hopefully increase your cash flow and then ultimately increase your net worth. So it's all about keeping the money in your pocket and building your real estate portfolio, which then builds your net worth.
And real estate doesn't necessarily mean four walls. That can mean land and other investments, correct?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it really includes some esoteric things that you wouldn't even think of, like air rights and water rights and mineral rights. Certain types of oil and gas interests would qualify. Some people maybe can't afford to buy the entire property, so they buy a fractional interest. Usually they'll buy that as a tenant in common with other investors. Or another method that has surfaced since about early 2000s, would be the Delaware Statutory Trust, where you buy a percentage of the trust and become one of many investors in large commercial properties. So all of that qualifies. So really the categories that you can reinvest in is a really broad category, and it really gives the property owner, property investor, a great way to either reposition or diversify or consolidate their real estate portfolio. Whatever they're trying to do, there's always a way to meet their goals.
And that's one of the really cool things about the National Council of Exchangers group that we are actually a part of. And they're even trading in gold and actual gold mines. So that was a first for me.
True, absolutely.
Now,
we even had them ask us if they could settle a real estate transaction in cryptocurrency, and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, and ITEX, and I started to say I'm losing my mind. No, I'm actually just so intrigued by all the different things. It blows your mind, just all the different ITEX. I mean, here in Kansas, I hadn't really heard of that Bitcoin I had, but so many intriguing ways to trade out different things inside of a 1031 exchange.
Absolutely, yep. It's a great way to really diversify if you're looking to spread wealth or spread risk or, get more units, or it's a great way to consolidate. Some people who, would get closer into retirement, and people are like, I'm so tired of property management headaches. I just want to get into something that I don't have to work that hard. And so they can use the 1031 exchange to maybe sell the single families and get into storage or something like that, where the management is so much easier, maybe warehouse. So there's just a lot of options. It really depends on what their goals and objectives are, and then they sit down with you and kind of figure out what to do to get there.
Not to mention businesses. So anything that's income earning, correct?
Absolutely, yep. Especially if you own a business and you have to enlarge your facilities. A lot of times people just sell their either office or retail or whatever the industrial space is, and don't even ask their accountant, and then they have to go buy a bigger space to run their business in, and they find out they got killed in taxes. So business use qualifies also. So if you're trying to expand your facilities for your company, you can certainly use the 1031 exchange for that. So sell your current property and then reinvest in a bigger property that you're going to use your business in. And, that could get a little more complicated because you probably have to buy first and get it ready before you move into it, and before you move out of your current property. So you're probably looking at a reverse exchange where you're going to buy first and then retrofit it or what have you, get it ready, and then once you're ready to move into it, you can sell your existing property through the 1031 exchange.
Speaking of which, when it comes to different things that get traded inside of the group, we have some folks that are really wanting to unload some money on really large apartment complexes. So if that's something that you know of or are thinking about doing, I can hook you up with the buyer. So be sure and give me a call. 785-213-5188. Bill, you handle Kansas. So how would they get a hold of you?
We do absolutely handle Kansas. They can call me direct at area code 619-239-3091. Again, that's 619-239-3091. Or they can go to our website at Exeter1031.com. So that's EXETER 1031.com.
And so last week, obviously, we were talking about ranches, but you had mentioned prior to us going on the show that you wanted to do some clarification as far as like the homestead was concerned.
Yeah, it's something I forgot to mention the last time. And in a lot of cases, what happens is you've got a farmer or a rancher, and the property is not just the farm or ranch; it's also their primary residence. So maybe they live on the corner acre or something like that. And so that's what we call split use, where when they sell that property, the percentage of the portion that's used as their primary residence, that falls under that $250,000 or $500,000 tax-free exclusion because it's their primary residence. And everything else would be the rental, investment, or business use property. So they really get the benefit of both tax codes there. So the key there is really sit down with the accountant, figure out how to allocate between a primary residence and their farm or ranch or what have you. And there's probably some wiggle room, depending on how you can position it, to help you from a tax perspective.
And we were talking about businesses, and prior to coming on the show, we were talking about assisted living complexes and nursing homes and things like that.
Yep. I thought you were going to go down the juicy path.
So when we started this, we'll get you in on the inside joke. I said we need to make this juicy. It's our last one. And so then it led...
That's about where we lost it.
Yeah. Sorry.
We digress.
Yeah. So after we stopped giggling when we started recording, and it all started with assisted living and how ornery folks can get in their older years. So, but if you're up for that, you can actually exchange that in a 1031 exchange or purchase. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of people 1031 exchanging out of what they currently have and into, assisted living, memory care, all types of facilities designed for your later years. And certainly with the demographics, that just looks like a really strong industry because we're all getting there. We're all going to be part of that group at some point. So there's a lot of people repositioning in that category. And some of those Delaware statutory trusts that I mentioned are also jumping into that area in a big way, too. So it's certainly a great area to focus in if that's what you like.
How often do you see those kinds of transactions taking place?
I think it's a lot more than it used to be. I'd probably say maybe 5% of our clients are really focused on that specific asset class. And that's probably increasing as well. That's just a demographic that looks good in the future, so they're repositioning into that. And in a lot of cases, too, what they're buying through the 1031 exchange is the real estate. They may or may not be actually operating the business. So in a lot of cases, they're probably buying the real estate and then leasing the property to the assisted living or memory care facility that actually operates the property. And at least that way, it's more like almost like a triple net lease. They get monthly income, but they don't have to actually work and administer the facility.
Which is a great option. It's a lot less headaches than dealing with month-to-month renters. Not that month-to-month renters are all headaches, but just, if you've ever had them, you know what I'm talking about.
That's so true.
So, especially with, COVID going on and so many people losing their jobs, I'm sure it's actually gotten a little stressful for people. So this may be a perfect time to look at what are my other options, We've
certainly heard that a lot of the seminars, webinars we do, the investors will ask questions along the lines of, I've been approached by my tenants and they're having trouble, they've lost their job, they've been furloughed, what have you, and they're asking for help or a discount or waiving 1 or 2 months rent, and depending on your situation, that can be painful also. So it might be a time to look at, do I want to keep going with this or reposition to something else that might be easier?
Yeah, and I'm in a group of real estate agents from around the country, and we were talking about different investors that they had and how it impacted them. And some of them, rental income dropped to 40%, which is huge. That's
a huge drop. That hurts, yeah.
Yeah. So
was that a specific geographic area, or are their holdings all over?
It was more in the states that weren't able to go to work. So
okay.
I don't want to out them without their permission, but there were states that specifically, even real estate, you weren't allowed to trade or do any kind of sales at all. So they were really seeing a huge struggle. Imagine needing to move, having orders to move, and not being able to go anywhere, and not being able to put your house on the market or anything. They had it way worse than we did here. Way worse. So
yeah, that makes it challenging. It's kind of locked down across the board.
Yeah, I was on a panel where there was so many from each state, and listening to those guys and gals, it was just like, man, thankful to be in Kansas and thankful to be able to have that ability to continue to sell and get people to where they needed to be able to go. because, if a job's expecting you in a certain time frame, you've got to go. You can't always afford multiple houses or be in the middle of a transaction and all of a sudden it stops. So
that's true. And we've got a number of universities right around us here too, and we've kind of heard the same from the students' perspective, where they all sign leases, and all of a sudden now they're not permitted to go to school. It's going to be all done online, and of course the landlords are sitting there wondering what's going to happen with rent collection.
Absolutely, very, very strange place to be. But I know everybody's tired of talking about COVID, so we'll be back after this word from our sponsors, and we'll talk about other ways to get into a 1031 exchange and what you can be getting into that specifically. Thanks for listening to Real Estate 101. We'll be back here in just a few.
At SportsMomsUnited.com, we celebrate every athlete and support every sports mom. SportsMomsUnited.com is on a mission to put logic back in youth sports. When you ask young athletes why they play sports, their number one answer is fun. For them, that means being on a team, making new friends, having a good time, all of which are awesome memories. We add to the memories by featuring an athlete of the day and sharing their story. Nominate an athlete today at www.sportsmomsunited.com.
Southwest Topeka has a good neighbor, State Farm agent Jim Garrison, now at 29th and Urish. If your current insurance situation has you going around in circles, get off the roundabout and stop in and meet Jim and his wonderfully efficient staff. Let Jim Garrison give you a quote and make the Garrison comparison. He's confident that with State Farm's competitive rates, the right coverage, and his unmatched service, you'll want to make him your new insurance agent. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, and Jim Garrison is there for you, northeast of the roundabout at 29th and Urish.
When someone has a passion for what they do, it comes through in the product they provide their customers. Just ask LaRocco's Pizza's new owner, Jason Johnson, about their crust. They make it every day and let it rise for a minimum of 24 hours before they use it for the pizza. And his staff doesn't want to do anything they won't be the best at, and you can taste it in their pizza. LaRocco's Pizza, just a half block north of the I-470 and Gage Boulevard exit. Come taste the difference.
Thanks for joining us again. This is Carrie Brown, Associate Broker with eXp Realty and the Preferred Advisors team, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. I am back with my co-host for the month, Bill Exeter with the Exeter Group. And prior to the break, we were talking about different 1031 exchange options. And so a couple that we didn't get to is what happens when a 1031 exchange fails or it ends up being a partial deal instead of the whole thing that you had planned on. So if something in the works kind of falls through, what happens?
And that's a good area to chat about, because there's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, brochures and what have you. A lot of things you read will say things like you have to trade equal or up in value. So if you sell for 100, you have to buy for 100 or greater. And they'll make statements like that. And for the most part, that's true if you want to defer all of your taxes. But in cases where you're selling for 100 and maybe you only find 80,000 that you want to buy, you trade down in value. That's okay. It won't hurt the 1031 exchange. A lot of people think, "Oh my God, your exchange is blown." It's not true. Your exchange will still qualify, but you've traded down in value, so that $20,000 difference would be taxable. So trading down is okay as long as you realize you're going to pay some taxes. If you trade too far down in value, then you would pay all of your taxes, and the exchange wouldn't provide any benefit. So you certainly want to have your tax advisor crunch the numbers. Make sure you know exactly where your tax liability is, so you know what the impact would be. Now, sometimes it's the old real estate rich, cash poor adage, and sometimes trading down in value and pulling some cash out is a good strategic thing to do, because you have absolutely no cash reserves, and that can kind of create some cash reserves for you. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Partial exchanges, either by trading down in value or getting more debt and pulling cash out, is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're going to pay some taxes.
So, say, for instance, you are like, "Listen, I'm getting out. I'm going to settle up at the bank. I'm going to keep a little, but I just want to pay off the big chunk." What happens? What kind of tax ramifications are you looking at because you did not reinvest that chunk that you're paying off to the bank?
Good question. There's a number of options there, too. So probably the most common is exactly the way you explained it, where they just want out of debt. For whatever reason, they're just tired of debt, or they are getting into retirement and want to get rid of debt, et cetera. And so let's say that it's a $100,000 property. We've got $60,000 in debt, $40,000 in equity. If we sell the property, then the $60,000 in debt is going to be paid off at the closing of the sale. That leaves you $40,000 left over. We could take that and do a 1031 exchange and buy property for all cash at $40,000. Now that means they're trading down by $60,000. So that's a big amount. That's a big trade down. So the first question is, would the 1031 exchange provide any benefits? That's where you want to talk to your tax advisor. Make sure that there's some benefit. So the bigger the debt, the more likely the exchange won't provide any benefit because you're trading so far down in value. But that is one way to do it, especially during recessions. People are trying to cut back and get rid of debt, and they know they're going to get rid of the debt, and they're going to trade down in value, and it's on purpose. It's a strategic decision to get rid of the debt, and they're just going to have to make sure they've got resources to pay the taxes when it comes time for that. The other possibility, which a lot of people don't have that kind of cash laying around, but in that same example, if you sell for $100 and at the closing the $60,000 of debt is paid off, you could put $60,000 out of pocket cash into the purchase, and that is effectively replacing debt with cash. So you'd sell for $100, buy for $100, and the purchase would be an all-cash purchase. That would also qualify, but that's a lot of cash to come up with, and most people don't have that ability. But either would work. You just trade down on purpose, get rid of the debt, or you put in out-of-pocket cash to cover that.
What about doing seller carrybacks?
Seller carryback could certainly qualify. On the purchase side, a seller carryback note is considered the same as any other debt. So if you're selling, in the same example, if you're selling for $100,000, you got a $60,000 mortgage or debt, and you sell, you close, and that $60,000 is paid off. On the buy side, you could take your $40,000 in equity and acquire property where the seller is willing to do a seller carryback note, and that would certainly qualify. That's just like normal debt for 1031 exchange purposes. So that would certainly work. If you're selling property and the buyer asks you to do a seller carryback note or potentially do like a land contract, that's where it gets more complicated, because when you sell property, normally the buyer would come in and put 20, 30, 40% down cash, and then the balance would be debt, and you as the seller would end up with all cash left at the closing, and you could easily do a 1031 exchange. But if you're the seller and the buyer says, I'm having trouble getting financing, or whatever the reason is, would you take 20, 30, 40% down and take the rest back in a seller carryback note? You could do that, but the problem is now the 1031 exchange has some cash, but has a big note there, and that's part of the proceeds. You've sold the property, and part of your proceeds is that seller carryback note. So how do you buy replacement property when you've got a cash balance and you've got a seller carryback note? So it can certainly be done if you can find a seller of replacement property who's willing to take that note as part of the payment. We would just endorse the note over to the seller, and that's part of the payment for their property, and that would certainly work. In fact, you and your group, the National Council of Exchange Orders, excels in that type of creative transaction, so that would be perfect for you guys.
Yeah, I was just thinking that would still give you some tax shelter, and not speaking as a tax expert by any means, but it would be a constructive way of not paying a bunch of taxes.
Absolutely. So the one thing for investors to keep in mind is when they sell property, and if they use a contract for deed or if they do a seller carryback note, they're both really treated the same. Mechanically they're different, but effectively they're the same. You sold your property today, and you're not going to get paid until the future. But the sale has really occurred today. So today is when you would have to structure the 1031 exchange, not in the future. And so, for example, maybe a 3-year contract or a 3-year seller carryback note, and in 3 years you're getting a balloon payment with the principal pay down. But that's not really the sale of real estate 3 years from now. That's just getting the cash. The debt's paid off. That's getting the cash. But the sale of real estate really occurs today. So today's when you'd have to do the 1031 exchange, but you don't have all the cash. So there's ways to do that. It just gets a lot more complicated.
It's definitely something to look at, and that's the reason why people like Bill are around to help you say, okay, we can make this work. This is how we're going to do it. And people like me to help you find the properties to make that happen.
Just takes a little creativity and looking outside the box.
Yeah. I mean, everybody thinks real estate, and not everybody, but a large majority think, okay, well, it's sign in the yard, make an offer, this is my house, and they don't really look beyond that into what else could I be doing beyond just this. So I'm looking to invest, I've got some extra cash, I'll go get a rental. But how do you protect yourself in all of that? And that's the whole reason why we've had this entire month of having Bill on the show. So
bring out the old creative ideas and go from there. We're seeing a lot more of those now with the COVID-19 issues, too. There's, deals that are really good deals, but the lenders are just putting all sorts of crazy underwriting requirements in place. So to get a deal done, in some cases you have to do a seller carryback note. So that just really means you got to be proactive, talk to your advisors, and sit down and come up with a plan of attack. Make sure it's a really solid plan before you actually close. Once you close, it's a little hard to go back and fix things if you found a problem.
Absolutely. And, things are going to settle down because they just do. And at that point, you can go back and reassess. Okay, well, now I can get a loan. I can pay that and not have to owe the seller if that's what you choose to do. So
right.
Definitely, it would be a now solution for a later problem.
True. Well put. I like that. You have to steal that.
I was just sitting here thinking, did I say that backwards? But if you agreed with me, I don't think I did. Oh, mercy. So, Bill, we're down to the last few minutes here. Why should they use you whenever they're ready to make these kinds of decisions?
I think one of the biggest benefits, one, is that we are one of the only qualified intermediaries that has any kind of government oversight. Less than 1% have government, either regulation, oversight, licensing, anything like that. And it's not because we're an exchange company. It's because we chose to go through the regulatory approval process and become a trust company so that we now are licensed, regulated, and audited by the Division of Banking. So I think it's key to have somebody who's, that has that government oversight to make sure we're safe and sound. And then from the investor's perspective, that certainly protects you. But from the other side of the coin, you want someone who is going to think outside the box and is going to review documents and is going to make suggestions. If they find problems, point out the problems. If they see a better way to do something, point that out and suggest that the investor and their advisors maybe take a different look at it. So we're more advisory and consultative in conjunction with the investor and their advisors to help them kind of navigate through this, because it's a complex subject, and if you're just left out there on your own to figure things out, it's stressful.
Absolutely, and if it's your first time doing it, a lot of this is really easily kind of right on over the head. And Bill is really good about breaking it down, and that's the reason why I asked him on the show, because, for one, you're funny, and two, you break it down into layman's terms, and that's really what you need, because a lot of it is, especially when you're first getting started, it can be very daunting. So having somebody that can really break it down and explain it to you and make you feel like, okay, I've got this, that's what you need. And I think Bill is really good at that.
Hey, does that mean I've provided the juicy content?
Close.
I had to throw that in. I just had to.
Sorry, folks. This all started with the fact that I'm very sleepy today. So it was more about keeping me awake, but I think you did it. So.
Yay.
So if you're looking to buy or sell, be sure and give us a call at 785-213-5188. Be sure and check out our website, too. You can set your own searches, and we cover all of Northeast Kansas. So Zillow doesn't even do that because not all MLSs participate. Bill, how do they get a hold of you again?
They can call me directly at area code 619-239-3091. Again, that's 619-239-3091. 3091, or go to our website at Exeter 1031. That's EXETER 1031.com.
Thanks for listening to Real Estate 101.
Thank you for listening to Real Estate 101 with the Carrie Brown team from Preferred Advisors.